you enjoying that sun, Sergeant Max? Sun shining on you. Are you taking a selfie?
No, I'm actually just staying.
Withdraw. You bet. Americans we. Queen City will be next. Don't forget about that repeat, the roadmap of that. Queen City.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. If you are a Vietnam War veteran in our audience, you would like to participate in our welcome home procession, please report to the Citizens Gallery at this time. We have volunteers in the back to direct you to the auditorium. Calling all Vietnam War veterans.
Okay, again, don't forget it has that break string and then the DS back to the trio for Queen City. Queen City. next. Number 31. Why'd you go, oh, like that? Snap. We got. We've got 4 minutes to play Army Strong. He has an announcement or a question. Yes. If he gives a 2-minute warning, yes, then it's water. So 5 minutes. You can say 5.
Ladies and gentlemen, our ceremony will begin in 5 minutes. Please make your way to your seats at this time.
Army Strong.
I have the deepest appreciation for all who have served or are currently serving our great country. And I'm incredibly proud of the work being done by the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. Although NVMM is based in Columbus, its reach is national, telling the history and stories of veterans from all branches of service across America. It's a place of inspiration, remembrance, and learning. It offers a unique experience you can't find anywhere else. Most importantly, it gives a voice to every man and woman who answered the call of service to our country. Coming here helps me and my family better understand and honor the journeys and sacrifices of America's veterans. One of the many things I appreciate is that the museum and memorial helps further the appreciation we have for our veterans, no matter our age. I encourage you to join me by investing in the museum's important mission as a corporate philanthropic partner and personally as a member. Together, we can celebrate and preserve the legacies of our American heroes.
Master of ceremonies today is the program director and on-air host from iHeartMedia. Please welcome Boxer.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here. This is my first time being a part of such a great event, so it's great to have you here with us. Distinguished guests, Vietnam veterans, and all veterans of all eras. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to be here today on behalf of the museum staff and the board of directors. We welcome you to the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. If this is your first time here, by the way, I hope you take some time after our event today, our ceremony, to just take a look around and check out all the amazing stories. The memorial itself is just a very peaceful place to go and sit on such a beautiful day, with it being Good Friday as well. You know, as you know, many Vietnam veterans, including family members of mine, loved ones, friends, family friends, didn't get to enjoy a memorable homecoming after their service. And this is our opportunity to change that. Bill Butler said it best yesterday on my show when he was on, and he said, it gives us a chance to change what was wrong and make it right. So if we could, please direct your attention now to our center aisle here, and let's welcome home our Vietnam War veterans being led into the Great Hall by our keynote speaker, Tom Cunningham. Ladies and gentlemen, you're real rock stars and celebrities of this great country. Give them another hand, yeah! Thank you, welcome home. Ladies and gentlemen, if we could now stay standing, if you're able to, for posting of the colors by the Capital University ROTC, and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem by Sergeant Su Yu Chu of the 338th U.S. Army Band.
Forward, march.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and to our veterans up front, you may be seated now. And now, ladies and gentlemen, as we get comfortable and seated, I'd like to welcome someone who I've had the pleasure with working with before, and totally forgot that I met him before at a USO event, but it's great to have him back. Such a kind man. Chaplain Thomas Whiteman, a Lieutenant Colonel of the 121st Air Refueling Wing, the Ohio Air National Guard, for our invocation.
I'll allow my brothers to get their seats. And sisters. Will you join me as we pray? Our Father in heaven, we thank you and we praise you for your presence with us here today. Father, as we come together again to welcome home our veterans of the war in Vietnam, to remember those who did not return, and to pray for the families of all who endured this war, we ask that you would be with us. Today, as we honor our nation's exercise of a tradition called for in many of the world's religions, to care for and to rescue the orphan of those oppressed, we ask, Lord, that you would continue to use our nation as a beacon of liberty and freedom, that you would remind us that the heart of a warrior is directed at more than only winning battles. It's motivated to save and to serve. And so, Lord, we ask that you would be with us. Again, be honored by all that we do, all that we say, and take us from this place moved to action, moved to serve. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain. Today's ceremony is made possible by the generous support of our signature event sponsors, including Nationwide, Honda, Coda, Lane Aviation, with additional support from Battelle, AEP Foundation, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, and FedEx. Our acting president of the National Veterans Memorial Museum, Bill Butler, who's a retired colonel from the U.S. Army. He's a 27-year career Army infantry officer, 3 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. His service continued after his return stateside. In May of 2019, he joined the museum team as chief of staff and is now acting president of the MVMM. Please welcome Bill Butler.
Well, thank you, Boxer, and welcome everybody to the National Veterans Memorial Museum. Welcome to our members, and most importantly, welcome to our Vietnam veterans as we try to right a wrong. The mission of the museum is to share the veteran experience with America and inspire service in others. And not just military service, but just become an active, engaged member of your community. Volunteer, serve local government. Learn civility and give back to others and join something greater than oneself. So that's why we're here. And we want to give back to our Vietnam veterans. So I was born in 1968, and it was in the middle of my dad's first deployment to Vietnam. And then his second deployment in 1971, 1972, I was about 3 or 4. And I've got some very vague recollections of his time in Vietnam as a toddler. I remember the transoceanic cable and a phone call and the echo and the delay in trying to have a conversation. I remember the reel-to-reel cassette tapes that he and my mom would ship back and forth, carrying on conversations from his time away and our separation. from him. And I've got a really vague recollection of his coming home ceremony. And it was me, my sister, my mom, and my grandparents and uncle went to the airport and picked him up. And that was it. And he came home. And then we had family photos taken down in Cincinnati at Alt Park shortly thereafter. That's my recollection of his coming home. You know, Vietnam veterans, they served in a time, it was the draft army, draft military, and they were individual replacements. They didn't form as a unit or fight as a unit or redeploy as a unit. So they came back as individuals. In many instances, we've heard tremendous amount of stories where they were spit on, they were called baby killers, they were embarrassed that they had served, they felt guilty in some level, but they vowed not to let that happen again to future service members and future veterans. And they served in many capacities. They became businessmen and women, they joined the medical profession, they served local community governments in many ways. And that vow came to fruition with my generation of veterans. Those who served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, those who served in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and many other places. We formed, trained, deployed, fought, and redeployed as units. So when we came back to great fanfare, military bands, celebrations, signs, hundreds of families, if not thousands, on the parade fields in a ceremony welcoming everybody back. They vowed not to let it happen again, and they didn't. So we want to pay them back for the standard that they set and pay them back for the pain that they endured by welcoming them home, which is why we're here today. So one more round of applause to our Vietnam-era veterans. So now I'd like to introduce by videotape Senator Tom Carper. He's a U.S. Senator from Delaware, and he is also an OSU graduate, and he's a U.S. Navy Vietnam-era veteran. He served 3 tours in the waters around Southeast Asia, and he's the only veteran in the Senate for our country. So he's got some taped remarks. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Senator Tom Carper from Delaware. 23-year Navy veteran, the last Vietnam veteran, currently serving in the United States Senate. It's an honor to talk with you at this Vietnam War Veterans Day Welcome Home ceremony. I want to thank the National Veterans Memorial and Museum for hosting this event and for providing a long overdue homecoming to our Vietnam veterans. On this day 51 years ago, the United States Military Assistance Command of Vietnam was dissolved and the U.S. combat troops finally departed Vietnam. Ever since, March 29th has become National Vietnam War Veterans Day. 51 years is a long time, but along with many of you, I remember all too well the return and reception that many of our service members received. A little fanfare, no welcome home ceremonies, and no parades. Today, we're here to do what should have been done 51 years ago, and that is to welcome home our Vietnam veterans with honor and thank them all. Thank you and your families for your service and sacrifice. So welcome home. During my time in Washington, D.C., I've often started my mornings by running on the National Mall out to the Lincoln Memorial. And on those runs, I frequently run alongside the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, which has more than 58,000 names etched into its black granite walls. And I literally take my fingers and I literally touch the names of the 58,000 brothers and sisters, heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice in Southeast Asia, including 8 nurses who didn't make it home either. And for those of you here today whose father, or maybe your uncle or brother or nephew never returned home, or who, for those of you whose relatives was maybe one of those 8 brave women, I just want to say this: we'll never forget their service. We'll continue to honor their memory. We must also ensure that we're living up to our sacred obligation to care for our servicemen and women, along with their families when they do return home. And that's why I've dedicated so much of my service, my career after the Navy, to improving access to quality care at our VA hospitals in Delaware and other places, and in providing service members and veterans with the resources that they need to not just survive, but to thrive. I'm a Navy guy, but whenever I meet veterans and service members from other branches, I remind them that while we wear different uniforms, we're all in the same team, and we always will be. That's especially true of so many of the folks that are listening to the sound of my voice today. So let me close by saying this. Today, we're here to turn a page in history, and we're here to usher in a long overdue honor. To those of you who served, thank you from my heart to each of you for your service. And to your families, thank you for sharing your loved one and for your sacrifice as well. We owe you our humble thanks. We owe you our deepest gratitude. So welcome home, welcome home, welcome home. Bravo Zulu, as we say in the Navy when people do extraordinary things with their lives. Bravo Zulu. Take care. God bless. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is time, and my great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Tom Cunningham. Tom is a native of Columbus, and in April of 1970, he went to Vietnam with the Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 62. As a Navy corpsman, working at the job site and in the field every day, he treated hundreds of military and civilian casualties and called in close to 100 Medevacs. Tom spent 25 years with the U.S. government in facilities and maintenance management. Tom, a Purple Heart recipient, had been an active member of the MVMM since the opening in October of 2018. Great ambassador for the museum, and we are fortunate enough to share Tom's story of service throughout our exhibitions. Tom consistently inspires others to become something bigger than themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tom Cunningham.
Can I move this off to the side? Good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I want to recognize a couple of people. John, would you stand up, please? This is an example of service to country. Introduce yourself, sir.
John Looker, Vietnam, 68, 69, 3 Purple Hearts, and I came home not to development, but I came home on a hospital ship, so I didn't have to put up with any of the other 15 women who were spit on, thrown rotten eggs at, all that. So, thank you.
John, I believe in addition to your 3 Purple Hearts, you also have a Silver Star. Is that correct? Okay.
And I was inducted into the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame November 9th of last year.
And John and I are wearing zoot suits. The jacket we have on represents the Military Order of Purple Heart, and anybody who has been a state commander or national officer has to wear it when they're up in front of people, or you wouldn't find me in this thing. So, and I also learned something today from Bill. I got to meet his dad, and his dad was one of the original spooks. If you've ever heard of the Military Service Command in Vietnam, he was one of these guys that jumped out of helicopters and went into the enemy territory, outnumbered, outgunned, and hoping like hell he'd get to come home. Now, he usually did because he had 2 Cobras flying on each side and a blue team behind him of a company usually to get him out. But they never went in to do anything except watch, and a lot of the times all they did was run to try to get home. If you've ever want to read it, it's some really fascinating story. Go look at the history of what Jim did. The interesting thing is that one of your speakers, Plaster, all right, made a statement at a recent meeting that, you know, I thought we only had 2,500, but 15,000 guys have come up and said, yeah, I did that. So we run into that all of the time in our organizations. Thank you for joining us today to celebrate this great day. This was originally in 2012, I think, by President Obama. and it became federal law, President Trump. Now, I want to open something. I'm going to read something, so we'll get all of the emotional things out of the way first. And I have copies of this because every time I read this, somebody says, wow, I'd like to have a copy of that. And it's called Our Minuet with Death. War is the province of death, and therein lies the paradox. War forces men and women for a time to be more intensely alive than they have ever been in their life or ever will be again. What a soaring elation to eventually escape and be enveloped in the quicksand of a daily existence. A life sentence of 8 to 5 with no parole and no terrors. Nobody comes back from war the same person, and it never ends for those who fight it. War is a specter which follows them for the rest of their life. No matter what they do afterwards, the apparition always comes up and says, there is nothing compared to me. And this haunting presence is correct. Intense emotional attachments of family and love flower, and over time most fade and grow old, as the veteran does. Mere wisps remind us of our bygone days. Yet in the winter of our lives, as we age, our grisly companion boldly steps forward again into our mystery reveries and brings forth the vividness of our youthful minuet with death. When you meet a veteran who has experienced actual combat, you should remember that no matter how he or she looks or acts, they are nothing like you. They know things that you didn't have to learn because in your life you didn't have to think about killing people or being killed. They thought about it constantly. You have never emerged a hair's breadth away from death with the elation that you're still alive, even though your buddies may not be. Nor have you ever had to endure the presence of that death stalking you every day of your life, when you were young, when you were middle-aged, and you were old, even when the danger has long passed. Unknown veteran, World War II. And the story stays the same. It's just a different time frame, but the story is exactly the same. Yeah, I'll show one flashback. Tuesday morning, this last Tuesday morning, pouring down rain. I woke up about 4:30 in the morning, set bolt upright, and thunder, artillery, metal roof on our house, and lightning, and I was terrified. I went back for maybe 10 seconds. Then I sat up and said, okay, remember your training. Thank you, PTSD training in the VA. I remember my training, and I said, okay, sit up, blink your eyes, look around. Nope, this ain't where I am. I'm home in bed with my wife, and I'm safe. In the greatest country in the world. Colin Powell, when he was here, right across the street in a pouring rain in October, when this place was dedicated, made a statement that I will never forget. In fact, it's down, some of it is downstairs on the wall. 42 million Americans have worn the uniform of our country. Where do we get such patriots? How do we find so many? Well, the answer is we get them from everywhere, from city, from town, from suburbs, from urban areas, every color and every origin. They represent the rainbow that is America and the strength and goodness of our country. But that cost for freedom is astronomical. But our country is willing to bear it, and our young people, men and women, are the ones that suffer those consequences. Since World War II, for every 1,000 soldiers who have been in combat, 10 have been wounded and 1 has been killed. That's a pretty statistical average, pretty tight all of the time. Those are sobering statistics, but even for the wounded veteran, or someone that lost a father, a mother, a brother, uncle, sister, daughter, they're life-altering tragedies. I'm going to read my second item, Welcome Home, Vietnam Veterans Day, March 30th. On March 30th, 1973, all U.S. troops withdrew from Vietnam under the terms of the Treaty of Paris. There were no ticker tape parades, as Bill alluded to. At the end of their honoring the veterans, no triumphant marches or speeches, as there had been at the end of each and every other World War. American veterans returned home in silence, or worse, in some cases, denigrated to the point of embarrassment for having served their country during a controversial war. Our soldiers served honorably and bravely in Vietnam. The proclamation stated, unfortunately, they arrived home to a country in political turmoil and never received the recognition that they deserve. Vietnam veterans also have been the driving force behind the respect given to those that followed. When you guys came home from Afghanistan and came home from Iraq, all the GWATers were treated as heroes, which is what they should have been. And a lot of that is because of the Vietnam veterans that made sure that would never happen again. The Vietnam generation did not want those that returned from previous combat situations to happen to them. For this, your service and sacrifice, we say thank you and welcome home. This was in the Purple Heart magazine in 2016, talking about the official day. Some interesting facts versus myths about Vietnam combat soldiers, or those that served. 65% of the World War II veterans that served in combat were drafted. 65% of the combat veterans that served in Vietnam were volunteers. Now think about that. 2.7 million U.S. troops served in Vietnam. Today, there are about 610,000 still living, and they're all my age or a little older. The average age is 74 and a half. On the wall, we have 58,000 names, but there were actually 41,000 killed in action and 309,000 wounded. 70% of all of the American troops killed in combat in Vietnam were volunteers. And this was before the volunteer military. So totally reversed. People don't realize that. You get the 1% in the media that says it makes it look bad for everybody. 70% of those people were volunteers. Whether you were a frontline combat trooper or an E1 REMF, and if somebody doesn't know what an REMF is, ask a veteran, they will tell you. All of those in the country served had the same issues. They all dealt with the climate, Agent Orange, burn pit issues, and the new kids on the block, PTSD and TBI. Many years back, the American Legion stated that it's a shame when there's money for the war but not for the warrior. But then the U.S. just withdrew from Vietnam, like has been similar several times in the last 50 years. And everybody just wanted to forget. Well, everybody but the soldier. They came home to this. And until, who do we have here from state or local office for American Legion? Would they stand up, please? Anybody? Okay. All right, John. How about DAV? Anybody here from DAV? How about VVA, Vietnam Veterans? Okay. Those are the organizations led by Vietnam veterans that have made the difference in the treatment that we now get as veterans. And until that started, unfortunately, many of the soldiers solved their problems the same way that they still do now. Drugs, alcohol, or in our case when we were younger, an M1911. Now they call it a Glock, I believe. And we are working as government organizations, with the government organizations, to change that. It's our biggest issue right now. But it's gotten much better in the last few years. And the Vietnam veteran-led American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, and Vietnam Veterans of America are making positive inroads into getting what needs to be done. One of the things we have to realize is the VA gives you only what you can prove, not necessarily what you deserve. So we need people that are experts, such as High Department of Veteran Services trains veteran service officers. They train veteran service commissioners yearly to stay current. The Veteran Service Commissioners, almost all of them are Vietnam vets, and they know what it was like when it wasn't like what it should be. And they're doing a great job of getting ready. So this government proclamation of a special commemorative day for Vietnam was long due, and it's a step in the right direction to honor those that served, reflect on their service, give thanks for their service, and help them get over the results of their service. I'm not a fan of the perfunctory thank you for your service, because usually that means that individual doesn't have a clue. I am a fan of, as a fellow Vietnam veteran, I thank you for serving your country during a difficult time in our nation's history, and thank you for continuing to serve your fellow veteran to make life better for all. Every time I visit this place, I come away in awe, and I've been here a bunch of times. Please enjoy this amazing memorial. My story is told in here. I am privileged to be one of the 22 or 25 veterans that their story is told. But my story isn't different than a lot of people. Like John, I was wounded 3 times. No, only twice, because Cambodia and Laos don't count because we weren't there. So you can relate to that, Jim, okay? And like quite a few people, like John, what happens when you get wounded a 3rd time, John? You get to go home, okay? In my case, they pulled me out, and I was going back home with the Seabees. But I have a distinction of being wounded with the Marines in Laos, wounded with the Royal Canadian Marines in the Oshaw Valley, where they had their base camp right outside, just north of Dodge City, and then wounded with the Seabees. So when somebody says, who were you with? I just say, yeah. So, but my story is in here, but don't just look at my story. Look at the stories of all of the people that represent those 42 million patriots that served. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we give it up again for Tom Cunningham? Amazing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to help welcome to the stage Mark Cooper, who's the Associate Director of Advancement for the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. Mark?
Thank you, Boxer, and thank you, all of you, for coming today. We are tremendously privileged to have the support of our elected officials, and I want to make sure that I recognize a representative from Senator J.D. Vance's office, Stephen Cook. Steve, would you stand? Please pass along our thanks to the Senator for his representation and his support. Our mission here relies on the support we receive from individuals who value what we do to preserve stories like you just heard and like you will see in your tour of the museum. Since we opened in 2018, we have nearly 11,000 people who have become members of this place. You can find them by their stickers that they're wearing today. If you are an NVM member, a veteran member, if you can stand, please stand. If you want to raise your hand, just show me your membership pride here today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Staff, volunteers, absolutely. Now, Bob and Blair, would you remain standing for a second? We have 2 Vietnam War era veterans here who are great supporters. Blair is our newest Patriot Circle member, and his wife Carol is a Freedom Circle member. They are tremendous supporters of the museum. Thank you for your support. Remain standing. Bob is also a Vietnam War veteran. This year, we introduced a new higher level of support, our top level of membership support, called the Liberty Circle. And Bob jumped right to the front of the line and invested in this place that we hold so sacred. So Bob, Blair, Jan, Carol, thank you for all you do for us. So I won't sit down without making the pitch. If you would like to become a member, if you would like to make a gift to support this place, see me afterward. I'll be drifting around, or Maureen is back there waving her hands at our membership table. Please support this wonderful place and its mission with your membership and with your philanthropy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. If we could please have back Chaplain Whiteman for the benediction, please. Chaplain?
Please receive this blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you. And Father, we ask, as always, please bring us peace. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we start to wrap up here, if you could please help us with a round of applause for the 338th Army Band behind us. Also, Sergeant Chu and her performance of our national anthem. Sergeant Chu. And I don't think they could stay, but how about our color guard from the Capital University Army ROTC? Brainstorm Media for today's broadcast. Thank you, Brainstorm. Bill Butler, our acting president, and the entire NVMM staff and volunteers. And one last big, gigantic applause for Mr. Tom Cunningham. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a true pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to this event. And Tom, I want to personally thank you because I will never, ever again tell someone who has served just thank you for serving. I've always felt there's got to be more meaning than just those words, so thank you. You taught me a lot today with your speech. I appreciate it. God bless you. Well, this concludes our ceremony, ladies and gentlemen. We invite you to explore the museum. And finally, to all of our Vietnam veterans here with us today and watching from afar on our broadcast, on behalf of all of us, welcome home.
Ladies and gentlemen, Actually, that was a fun way to wrap up. Ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude this ceremony today, we are going to continue to honor our veterans downstairs. Please join us at 11:30 for a special screening with Vietnam veterans Charlie Plum and Tom Moe and their inspiring story of service as POWs during that Vietnam era. We welcome Tom. We welcome all of you here today. Enjoy your stay at the museum. Come down and see us downstairs, and thanks for your support.